Ed Wallace and I are going to dive into the Sandra Birchmore case. And she was in Africa when this all broke, the arrest. And immediately we started communicating. This ties into what we got going on with police officer John O'Keefe, Karen Reed trial. You're talking about Canton, the Canton area, the Norfolk DA's office. You're talking about a lot of these players that are dirty. And these cops, the three that are mentioned here, the brothers, Matthew, who is under arrest, Farwell, and his brother, William, and Deputy Chief Robert Devine. A year ago, they were mentioned, all three of them. Why aren't they all three in handcuffs? Why aren't they locked up? That's my questions. And I know there's more to this story.
Former Stoughton police detective has been indicted in the death of Sandra Birchmore. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm JC Monahan. Matthew Farwell is accused of strangling Birchmore to death in 2021. He's also accused of staging her apartment to make Birchmore's death look like she had died by suicide. Court documents show Farwell is accused of having a sexual relationship with Birchmore for several years. Birchmore was 3 months pregnant when she died.
This case here, this stuff that we're talking about here, man, it's really getting under my skin. Where there's smoke, there's fire. I'm sorry to say, appears to be a lot of collusion and corruption going on here. If you saw the text messages in the Karen Reed case, the state troopers, they were giving the lead state trooper some jazz about not being able to control the medical examiner's findings, and that they were saying that a senior member of the state police should have been given that task, and they would have got a different outcome from the medical examiner's office. This stinks to the high heavens what's gone on here, and it's taken years to get to this point where we have an indictment for homicide. I mean, my God, the guy came into the apartment building with rubber gloves on, not winter gloves, freaking surgical gloves, a mask and a hoodie. And you know what? They got to look into his background to see if he's taken any of my courses or the medical legal death investigation courses or any courses from, say, like Lieutenant Commander Vernon Gebeth on homicide investigations, because we teach about these hangings that are suicides, and some are accidental because it's involved in autoerotic death syndrome. That's a whole fetish in and of itself. Right. But there's no evidence of any of that here. In fact, just the opposite.
Pathologist hired by her family found Birchmore's death was not a suicide and, in fact, a homicide.
Birchmore says, so the father came by last night. It was like a complete 360 change. Person number 8 says, 180? Birchmore says, yeah, LOL. Person 8 says, good or bad? Birchmore says, good, but unexpected. So it kind of threw me off and made me a little uncomfortable. But that's because of how things were going. He asked me if I'd give him a key and said that if I keep it a secret, he'll be around and see, presumably she means the baby, and all that. So it's somewhere. And then he looked in my closet and then the bathroom, but I don't know why. Haven't figured that out. We started to have heart to heart, and then work called him, so he had to leave. Oh, and he brought me a ginger ale because I ran out. And person 8 says, what about the birth certificate? And Sandra says, I think he's signing it. Not sure. He's coming back again this week, but it was like a complete 180 from where we were at. 5 days after that conversation, on January 29th, she texted Detective Farwell the passcode to her building's front door. The next day, on January 30th, Sandra texted Farwell again, asking whether she could tell him the baby names that she was considering. And Farwell said he'd rather discuss that in person. And that brings us to February 1st, 2021, the day that Sandra Birchmore actually died.
He had the prosecutors, the state police, the local police, they had all of this information, right? Now, apparently the FBI had a long interview with the medical examiner's office to see what, in fact, the medical examiners were told by these officers as to, what their investigation revealed. All right, so it's a different system up there. It is a medical examiner system, but apparently by state law, because I trained these people in my medical legal death investigation course with Barbara Butcher at the medical examiners in New York City. We were told by the Massachusetts medical examiners personnel that by law, they're not allowed into the crime scene only to pick up the body. They're not allowed to do a medical legal death investigation on scene, and they rely on what the police tell them.
Interesting. And in this case here, it took so long for them to get to where they had to be with as far as goes with prosecution. And how are we to believe that he was a lone wolf in all of this? He's confiding in his brother, but there's a deputy chief involved in this thing. They talked about it a year ago, and it took them all this time. And then once the feds got involved, they went to the medical examiner and they talked with the medical examiner.
At 1:25 in the afternoon, she communicated with a photographer about a newborn photo shoot. And later she texted Matthew Farwell again, telling him she received an early gift in the mail and wanted to have a baby shower in late March. She also asked him to buy some clothes for the baby to wear when she and the baby came home from the hospital.
The person Birchmore confided in January 20th, 2021, calls the Stoughton police and references the sexual relationship between Birchmore and Farwell. The Stoughton police employee who received the call takes down the caller's name, gives it to Farwell. That message shouldn't have gone to Farwell. It should have went to his supervisor.
At 5:01 p.m., Birchmore is seen on surveillance video accepting a DoorDash order. She's then caught on camera twice more, 5:31 p.m. and 5:33 p.m., going outside with a snow brush. But that is the last time Sandra Birchmore is ever seen alive.
So apparently there's a snowstorm that night. She's going out to maybe brush off her car or something. And then he comes in and you see him come into the lobby with the hoodie up, the mask.
Now look closely at his hands. He doesn't have winter gloves on. He has rubber gloves on.
You know, why do you think that they just arrested the Matthew Farwell and not his brother and not the deputy chief Devine and others that were involved in actually determining this as a suicide and just going along with his, especially when they had this video footage. This is not something that was just breaking for them to find. They had to have had this, right?
Right, and they have other information that links them there. And you know, it's not just somebody came forward. Someone was a whistleblower in this whole cover-up, okay? Someone contacted the feds and say, hey, you need to look at this because this cover-up is occurring in this jurisdiction. It involves these various police agencies, these various detectives, and then possibly the prosecutor's office as well.
On February 4th, 2021, Sandra Birchmore was found dead in her Canton, Massachusetts apartment. The charges filed today in federal court allege that she was in fact murdered by Matthew Farwell 3 days earlier. We allege that Sandra Birchmore survived years of grooming, statutory rape, and then sexual violence, all at the hands of Matthew Farwell, who was employed throughout their relationship as an officer and then detective for the Stoughton Police Department. And when it became clear to Mr. Farwell that he could no longer control Sandra Birchmore, he allegedly silenced her permanently. This morning, Matthew Farwell was arrested on a federal grand jury indictment, charging him with one count of killing a witness or victim, specifically for killing Sandra Birchmore with the intent of preventing her from communicating information about his possible commission of federal crimes.
So you need to look into this. And when they did, they dug. They got a great forensic expert on strangulation, and he looked at it and he said, no way, you know, based on the injuries, the bruising and the chain being broken and so forth, that the hyoid bone being broken, this is not a suicide by ligature strangulation, that this was manual strangulation, and it made it look like a ligature strangulation.
And the text messages went back and forth. He said he wanted to come meet her at like 9 o'clock at night. This is after she told him she was pregnant and everything with his child. His wife was due, I believe, the next day or very soon thereafter.
At 9:08 p.m., Matthew Farwell texts her asking whether he can, quote, come by for a second. And 2 minutes later, Sandra texts him back, telling him the door will be open. The phone records show that her phone was locked at 9:13 p.m., but it recorded a black screenshot at 9:18. The phone's health tracker indicates she took her final steps at 9:40. Phone's battery died 2 days later. On February 3rd, But Sandra's body wouldn't be found until the 4th because police did a well-being check. When they found her, her phone was on the floor 12 inches from her right hand, 6 inches from her bent right knee.
This guy's married, piece of garbage, is married and having this affair. And look, we have to understand that he took his position of power at the age of 12, this girl was, when she came into that Explorer program. And then he says that he started having relations with her when she was of age, which is bullshit. But he started on paper where they can actually prove it at 15 with her. And she's going to present him with this cardboard thing that she made that says we're having a baby with his name on it and everything, and he winds up killing her. It's just so troubling on so many levels that they let this thing sit for so long. And how does it stay?
Well, again, thank God for the feds stepping in here, but I think there are more indictments to drop down the line. And I think it's also going to, it's definitely going to bleed over into the Karen Reed case.
Oh yeah. I mean, how could it not? Right? Mm-hmm. How could it not?
3 days later.
The contents of a cell phone assigned to the state trooper investigating Karen Reed could end up being a bombshell in other cases. Today, the Norfolk DA announced it's received the phone data and could now affect 2 other high-profile cases.
No, right now they're establishing a pattern of corruption and malfeasance on the part of the various law enforcement agencies and the prosecutor's office. And the feds' investigation always take a long time. The feds are never fast moving. They're always slow. It takes years, and then bam, they do these big indictments and they round up a lot of people.
Why? I guess because this was classified as a suicide. Could it be that they just didn't do any investigation at all? I mean, that doesn't make sense.
Well, they got an exceptional clearance, right? They EC'd this case. For those of you who don't know, like we have terminology in the NYPD and other law enforcement agencies. And apparently, this law enforcement agency has the same terminology we use in New York City, where you have exceptional clearance. It's called exceptional clearance, EC. And so they closed the case, exceptional clearance, because it was deemed a suicide. Okay. Now there's arrests. There's all different ways the cases can be closed. So, some supervisor had to sign off on this investigation to close this case like this.